yes, in terms of
Responses to first review questions.
responses to first review. Yeah, I guess what I want to know is were responses to first review adequate, and responses to were responses to
Our recommendations.
PHI recommendations,
Yeah.
were they adequate?
I believe they were.
That makes it easy. Okay, so Kevin, that leaves you and you and I have been having email discussion, and I know you've been talking to John, either, I don't know if directly or through email, but I know you've been in contact with John. There's a lot of disagreement between water quality and the RPF, so I'll let you take it from here. And I guess what I'm hoping, or let me put it this way, what I'm suggesting is that if you don't mind going through your recommendations one by one, and you don't need to necessarily read them, I think we're all familiar with them, and then John, do you see any potential for...
Let me tell you.
Or, you know what, don't let me tell you how to do your job, just go for it.
Let me go for what I think are the two main issues here. One, I don't believe the engineering geologic mapping, the landslide mapping done to date is adequate. So, although I have great respect for Dave, I disagree that the mapping to date is adequate for landslides. One. Two, I don't think the water course classifications or mapping, extent and so on, I believe is really inadequate also. So those are going to be the two main issues I'd like to focus on.
Okay, well then, especially since Dave's here, I guess in terms of the adequacy of the review by various CEGs or PGs that have occurred to date, please don't take this the wrong way or anybody get offended, but this is one of those situations where I refer to as dueling professionals, which is not unusual, where you have two professionals and they don't agree, and yet they're both professionals. So my question to you, Kevin, is given the fact that, and then I'll let Dave speak, but how do you see resolving this issue?
Well, first off, I don't think Dave and I should be battling about this. I think
I didn't mean to be offended. It was just a joke.
The proponent should provide an adequate report in accordance with CGS Note 45. I think that was one of our recommendations. A lot of the geotechnical engineering geology work conducted to date has not been for the timber harvest plan. It's been for different proposed developments there, including the current one. And again, we could pick out one, the Lot Tree landslide, for example. The previous THP kind of poo-pooed it and said it wasn't there, and it's clearly there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But RGH never talks about that slide at all and whether it impacts the property. And, that's a big red flag for me. And one area of landslide that they do map, it mapped, its limits are too small. It's much larger than that. Another area that's been transferred into the THP maps, they show as a slide area upslope of the two Class 3 water courses that converge. That is yet to be corrected on any map. So it's, my review of the LiDAR maps and which I've looked at extensively, it looks like pretty much most of the slopes out there have been impacted by historic landslide at some point. Now, Dave could disagree with that.
Well,
That's fine. But there hasn't been any independent review of the RGH work. The city's EIR approval did not include any kind of geotechnical peer review. And I'm not putting my stamp or license on anything unless I see an adequate report submitted to it. It's simple as that.
well, hi Kevin, it's Dave. I agree that it shouldn't be you or I who's doing the mapping out there. That's not our job. And so I think you're not unreasonable in asking for the project proponents, consultants to address these issues that you've brought up. Some of the landslides that you've mapped are very subtle, and I'm not sure they're landslide deposits. You would need to do subsurface investigation in order to prove that.
I agree. I'm going
They're
off.
it looks like to me the mapping that you did on the map that you called a preliminary landslide map. Any steep slopes you mapped as a landslide.
Oh, really?
And, you know, a lot of these are drainages. They're just drainages. They're not landslides.
I don't think that's true, Dave, but you can give that opinion if you want.
Well, I think it should be the consultants who address that. And in reviewing a timber harvest plan, CGS is not going so far as to be reviewing or assessing slope stability analysis, and that's the sort of realm I think that you're wading into. A lot of these issues for development would require third-party review, and there would be a grading plan submitted, and normally following common practices in California, there would be slope stability analysis that are conducted along with those plans. Now, this development is not at that stage yet, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Correct. The fully designed plans will go before the city of Calistoga and have a separate peer review as part of that. Either the registered engineer of city of Calistoga, and or they may bring in separate peer review as necessary.
When do you anticipate that occurring? Or do you have that on is that on the horizon at any time?
Actually, a substantial portion of it actually has already been reviewed. As we, historically speaking, and as part of the original plan set that we received a final map for, we submitted the RGH geotechnical plans along with the structural engineering plans that went through a full review, which is part of the original harvest plan that we received and acted upon. That effort was indeed reviewed, and we essentially just parlayed that configuration of the roadway and work product into the modification of the resort endeavor. So the top ridge line of the project has changed, but not the alignment of the roadway per se going up the hillside.
I'd like to interject. I've had some recent correspondence with Eric Lundquist at the city. I asked him to confirm whether there had been a geotechnical peer review done, and he confirmed there had not been. It was done by they did a EIR review by Michael Brandman Associates. Michael Brandman Associates doesn't have any geotechnical engineering geologists on staff.
Kevin, you're partially correct. Eric is, as noted, as part of the EIR review and review of this of the resort project approvals. Indeed, during the EIR process, no, there wasn't a separate peer review because the plans are only at conceptual level, and when coming forth, they will indeed have to go through a peer review. So, correct, as part of the resort project, but what I was referring to are the historical documents as it relates to the original 35 lot plan and the design of the road, and those plans that were reviewed and certified were indeed reviewed.
Kevin, I have a question. To me, there's two issues going on here. One is a disclosure issue in terms of, has the area been adequately assessed? You know, our slides, you know, the rules require that slides be mapped, and so there's a disclosure issue. Have all the slides been mapped? And the second issue is the THP as mitigated now? All the mitigations requirements in the THP right now, are they adequate to not exacerbate any known or unknown slides? And I know that's not necessarily a fair question for an unknown slide, The rules do require if during part of operations, for example, if a slide becomes present, or not present, I should say, if a slide is discovered during operations that was not disclosed previously, then basically operations stop until they figure out what to do with the slide. So my question to you is, again, it seems, well, it's twofold. One is, part of it seems like a disclosure issue, but do you have a concern that even with what has been disclosed so far, mitigations are not adequate to address the known slides, for example?
Well, yes, of course I have that. And I brought up an example where RGH never, in any of their work, has talked about the large landslide map by Park Galatria of CGS. This is one example. Dave drew a headscarp area on into the plan a little bit. I think the slide is much larger. I think the morphology of that area is, to me, it's a much larger slide area that encroaches much more into the plan area. And again, if you're saying RGH has done these reports, but they've never talked about it, I can't sit and say, oh, this is adequate. I mean, I just can't do it.
Well,
That's just one area of the property.
okay, well, that's kind of what I was referring to earlier, and I won't use the term I used before, but where you have two professionals who look at the same piece of ground and they interpret it differently. I'm going to say they're not both necessarily correct and they're not both necessarily incorrect. But my point is they're both professionals. And I'm working under the assumption that they are reasonable professionals at...
Terry, I want to bring it up. The previous landslide was talked about in the previous THP, and CGS said it wasn't there, okay? It was due to differential erosion or weather.
I don't think that's correct.
And now it's clear that there's a landslide there. And whether the limits have been properly mapped or bounded, I don't believe they have. Again, RGH has never recognized that slide, never talked about it at all. But there are other areas of the property that are very anomalous, at least topographically speaking, that I believe need to be addressed.
Okay, well,
we know about large landslide debris flow that's active. I think the slide area is much larger than what RGH is showing on their map, and what the THP maps show. And that's all I can really say.
Well, Kevin, what debris flow was active? We didn't observe activity when we were on the...
When I come back active, 1990, Herzog was talking about it being recently active in their report. So, yes, 24 years, 25 years later.
Well, now it would be
nobody's
called...
ever even discussed why the debris flow occurred.
That would be suspended. Now it's suspended. It's not active.
Well, it's going to be, they have a road crossing it.
I agree that the causes of the landslide, or that debris flow, should be queried and addressed, which to me it seems pretty straightforward. It looks like the road is directing water to that location. But I don't think it's fair to say it's active.
Well,
That's an old debris flow that's suspended at this point in time.
okay, I'm going to jump in here, and again, I'm going to reiterate my point. We have two professionals who don't agree, and they both looked at the same spot, and that happens. So I'm going to go back to my original question, Kevin, in terms of, you're talking about an independent third-party review. So I'm asking, what would you find satisfactory? Because I'm thinking, okay, so now Enchanted Resorts, Enchanted Resorts LLC now hires, whether it's RGH or another firm, to go out there and sort of review what's done so far. Maybe they go out there to look at it. This is right now supposition. Or as they just go out there and go, okay, guys, tell me what's out there. Would that be adequate? Who's the third party review then? Because at that point, I imagine you'd look at it again, and then you're going to have. I would certainly ask Dave to look at that if we went that route, and then I'm sure it's going to get incorporated into the EIR. I mean, if you're going to spend money, you may as well get the most you can out of it. But what I'm really asking you is, so you feel these slides are, there's not full disclosure in terms of the number of slides that are out there. I'm hearing Dave going, He doesn't agree, but he doesn't disagree.
Well, yeah,
I don't know, but so how do we
because
resolve this issue is what I'm really trying to figure out.
I think what you said earlier about disclosure and then whether or not the conditions are mitigated are important points. And one, I think the disclosure should be done by the consultants. It shouldn't be done by us, the regulators. So,
Yes,
and Kevin's brought up a good point. There's topography out there that is suggestive of large, deep-seated landslides. Those are not the types of landslides we expect an RPF to map.
Is it the
They're
type?
large regional features. When we were on the ground, topography was smooth. It wasn't hummocky.
Okay.
So that's, and then when I looked at air photos and I looked at Google Earth images, to me they're very, very subtle features. And so I would say they're questionable whether or not they exist. But if they do, the consultants should address that. Your consultants should go out and say, yes, I agree, or say, there's bowl-shaped topography here, and there may be a landslide here.
Well, hey, Dave, do you believe the Lottery landslide is questionable?
No, not Mark's. I'm not talking about that one.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I think, this is John. I think we need to distinguish between the project development and the tree removal, because now, and our, as Dave said, from our standpoint, and it's been made very clear to us, as foresters, we don't practice geology without a license, but we are trained to recognize active features and things that could reasonably be expected to be affected by timber harvesting. Are these very deep-seated subtle landslides that we're talking about the kind that would be affected